The United Nations General Assembly is overwhelmingly demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Some 80% of member nations passed a resolution that's not binding after voting down 2 amendments by the U.S. and Austria.
Hamas welcomed the move as the Palestinian envoy called it a historic day.
We will not rest until we see compliance of Israel with this demand from the General Assembly.
Applause broke out the moment the result was flashed on the screens. Palestinians hailed the outcome, while the Israelis were more muted. The ceasefire was proposed by Arab and Islamic countries. They took it to the General Assembly after a similar move last week at the Security Council was vetoed by the United States.
Israel and the U.S., who were among the 10 countries who voted no, firmly believe a ceasefire will only allow Hamas to regroup. They pushed back ahead of the vote.
Any ceasefire right now would be temporary at the best and dangerous at worst. Dangerous to Israelis, who would be subject to relentless attacks, and also dangerous to Palestinians, who deserve the chance to build a better future for themselves, free from Hamas.
If you want a real ceasefire, here is the right address. This is the phone number of Hamas's office in Gaza. You can all call +970 599 3765 and ask for Yahya Sinwar. Tell Hamas to put down their arms, turn themselves in, and return our hostages. This will bring a complete ceasefire that will last forever.
For more, joining us now is Professor Gregory Treverton at the University of Southern California. He's former chairperson of the U.S. National Intelligence Council. Thank you for joining us today, sir. President Biden, he's becoming increasingly pointed with his remarks, now saying Prime Minister Netanyahu has to, quote, change this government. How much influence has the U.S. lost, and how far do you think Biden is willing to distance himself?
I think Biden's prepared to go quite far. I think he almost has to at this point. How much influence we have is always a question. There's always been a certain amount of the tail wagging the dog in U.S.-Israeli relations. But we still have plenty of influence. We are their major supplier of arms. We also provide lots of assistance, and we've been steadfast on their side for a very long time. There have been disagreements in the past, to be sure, over two-state solutions, over Oslo, over the 73 war. So there have been frictions, but on the whole, Israel has been pretty good at playing American politics. So this does, I think, reflect the hardening of global opinion against Israel, and that's made it increasingly difficult for Biden and the administration to side with Israel sort of unconditionally. And that's the result, I think, has resulted in the pressure to do more on humanitarian aid, stop short of calling for a ceasefire, and indeed veto the resolution in the Security Council. But I think there's going to be continued differences between them and increasing efforts by the administration to put pressure on Israel.
Well, Biden says that Israel is losing international support over its indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. But how much of it is Biden losing domestic support from voters over his handling of the Israel-Hamas war?
Well, it's very mixed. As you've seen, we've had vigorous debates on college campuses between pro-Israel factions and pro-Palestinian factions, and that's been a big issue in academia. So public opinion in the United States is still, I think, on the whole, strongly on Israel's side, but there's certainly plenty of political voices, particularly among progressive Democrats, who are skeptical, who want more humanitarian assistance done, who would like to have a ceasefire, and who want to at least imagine some decent future for Palestinians, including those living in Gaza.
Let's talk about the UN vote. 80% endorsing a ceasefire in Gaza. World opinion clearly shifting. What message does this vote send to Israel, and will the result impact Netanyahu's strategy at all?
It certainly sends the signal that Israel is increasingly isolated in the world. Whether that will change Netanyahu's position, my guess is not in the short run. I think he feels like they have to accomplish their mission So it's still a little unclear exactly what that mission is. When they talk about destroying Hamas, that's a pretty tall order. And we know that even if they take out most of the militants, including the leaders, that Hamas is going to wind up probably more popular after this war than before it. It wasn't very popular before because it wasn't either good at or interested in really governing Gaza. But that's the paradox, I think, that Israel faces. Now, perhaps as the Israelis consolidate their positions inside Gaza, they will feel that they can better monitor relief supplies. They've been worried about those being appropriated by Hamas fighters. So that may make them more inclined, I think, to that, and international public opinion will make them more inclined, I think, to try and do something on the humanitarian front.
It's a non-binding resolution by the UN General Assembly. So will it really make a difference? Does it really matter?
I think it'll make a difference. It makes a difference symbolically. It just underscores how isolated Israel is. Will it actually change Israeli decision-making in the next few days? I doubt that. No, I think they'll continue what they're doing, feeling like they've got to finish the mission, again, for all the ambiguity about what that mission is. But as they get closer, then the pressure will cause them to think more about opening the humanitarian gates a bit wider. Whether it'll be sufficient to get them to consider what we haven't seen yet, and that is kind of an end game. How do they imagine this war to end? The U.S. has been suggesting that the Palestinian Authority ought to take over Gaza. Israel said no. Our current track, it looks like the only alternative would be some Israeli occupation of Gaza. And that can't be in anybody's interest, not even Israel's.
Netanyahu's popularity has plummeted. He has been clear that a two-state solution needs to be prevented at any cost. Does Netanyahu need to change his tune on that if he wants to safeguard his political future?
I think so. I mean, I think everyone assumes that after the war is over, he'll be gone. But if he wanted to have a future, it seems to me he's got to begin attacking in that direction. He does have, I think Mr. Biden was right when he said this is the most conservative Israeli government in history. Israel has been drifting steadily to the right over the last generation or so. And that's put Netanyahu in this box he's now in, where he's dependent on some really ultra-rightists who are absolutely opposed to almost doing anything decent for the Palestinians. He's got to somehow escape that political box, it seems to me, if he wants to have any future at all.
And just quickly, what are you watching out for that will tell us about the trajectory of this conflict?
I'm really watching out for really the fighting on the ground, and the sense that what sense Israel has that is in good positions, has decent control of Gaza. That seems to me to be what they're seeking, and that would permit at least some conversation about more humanitarian aid, and maybe begin the conversation, though it seems distant at this point, maybe begin the conversation about how to create some decent existence for Palestinians, including in Gaza.
All right, we'll leave it there for now, Professor. Thank you very much for your insights today. Professor Gregory Treverton at the University of Southern California, and also former chairperson of the U.S. National Intelligence Council.